Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. We're going to be talking about a range of environmental issues from insect diversity to greening our college campuses with my guest, Dr. Beth Choate. She is Associate Professor and Chair of Environmental Science and Sustainability at Allegheny College. She was formerly with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Research Service as a postdoctoral research entomologist. And she's won many awards, including the Thorburn Award for Teaching Excellence 2022 at Allegheny College, and also 2018 Best Paper Award at the World Symposium on Sustainable Development at Universities for contributions to the publication Preparing University Students to Facilitate United Nations Development Goals. And she is co-editor of the book Educating the Sustainability Leaders of the Future. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
You obviously are trying to educate a new generation to be environmental stewards, and that means that they should have college campuses where they're learning that are green. Is that not the goal of most universities and colleges now?
That's a great question. I think many colleges would try to be more environmentally friendly, certainly. Students are extremely active in this. They see that change needs to happen. And so many colleges are thinking about how do we reduce our carbon footprint. Allegheny College has taken that a step further and is currently carbon neutral and accomplished that in 2018, which is very exciting. You are correct in that we are seeing this happen all across the nation, all across the world, where colleges are really trying to provide a great model for students to see what needs to happen to have a carbon neutral or a really sustainable campus. And that can be used as they leave those college campuses to inform their lives after college.
There's so much that needs to be done to make any institution green and sustainable. Businesses should do it. We need to do it in our homes. And the list really goes on page by page by page. Everything from going 100% renewable to using recycled paper, recycling on the campuses, to native plantings, to lead-efficient lighting, to even using gray water or recycled water when you don't have to have it for drinking purposes.
Definitely, yes. I was just going to add to your list, I think composting is very important. Getting students involved and figuring out how students can take action in their own daily behaviors to reduce energy use is also something that is very important to help students understand what it takes to be sustainable and how they can contribute.
Students, faculty, staff all need to eat. Are we finding that the campuses are going to organic foods, to vegan, vegetarian options?
That's a very good question. Our student body has definitely demanded, in a very good way, that we think more about vegetarian, vegan options. We particularly have thought a lot about where our food comes from. So not necessarily all organic food, but thinking about the distance the food is traveling to get to us. So I think that's also really important, is can you purchase food a little bit closer to home? And how might you go about doing that? In many college cafeterias, people are thinking about what happens to all this food that I'm throwing away. And so composting can be a really good way to keep it out of landfills and prevent methane from those landfills from going back into the atmosphere. And so there are lots of ways that we can think about lowering that footprint of our food and our dining services.
When I was trustee for the Los Angeles Community College District, I tried to make our 9 college campuses more sustainable. And the resistance that I got was sad because they said, oh, it'll cost more money. But I pointed out that if we spend a little bit more money now, we'll actually save money in the future being sustainable. Do you find that the financial resources available is what's holding back a lot of new, innovative, sustainable procedures and practices?
I think what you experienced is what we see happening in a lot of spaces and places. And to your point, you're exactly right. Investing a little bit of money up front can actually save a lot of money in the long run. And I know that's the messaging that we have used at Allegheny College to get people to understand the value of sustainability measures. And so I imagine, yes, this is holding folks back.
Here in the United States, we are such a consumer society that there is so much waste. And yet in other parts of the world, they could use what people here in America throw away. Are we going to see a better connection? Are the students at a small liberal arts college like yours connecting with students in other parts of the world, in Africa or Asia, the islands, and trying to help them?
That's a really good question, and that's something that we do try to help our students understand, is that we need to think about people in other places and how they are being impacted by some of our decisions here in the United States.
You wrote a publication preparing university students to facilitate United Nations Development Goals. Are we going to be able to reach good conservation, sustainable, universal goals?
I think so. I hope so. There are a lot of people thinking about this and working on this around the world. This book has lots of writers in it from all over the world, and they're doing amazing work with their students to really try to figure out how we accomplish the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Let's go to another area of your expertise, and that is as an entomologist. You are particularly concerned about the role of bees, how we're losing bees, how many bee species are there, and explain why they are so important to humans in terms of pollinating our agriculture, our plants, and how they're important to the wild ecosystem as well as to our domesticated agricultural system.
Definitely. You hear about the decline of honeybees, right? And that certainly is happening. We see that happening. We've seen yearly losses now of about 30 to 40% of honeybee colonies each year. That is a big concern. Honeybees are very important for agricultural pollination. But a group of bees that we don't spend as much time talking about and thinking about are what I refer to as the wild bees, right? So these are the bees that aren't living in colonies that we humans aren't managing. And there's over 2,000 species of these bees throughout the world. And they're flying around all the time. Think of sweat bees or the little green bees that land on you sometimes. They're not stinging. They're generally not living in colonies, so they're not as noticeable. But these bees are extremely good pollinators. Some of them are extremely specialized. They've evolved with plants, and so they're very good at providing pollination for certain types of plants. And there's just so many different species that it's extremely important that we think about that group of bees as well. We did a study here in the small town of Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is where Allegheny College is located. And within a 2-kilometer transect almost, we found over 100 species of bees, which was extremely exciting. So they're out there. We are seeing declines. While that number of species is very high, we're seeing abundance go down throughout the landscape. And as you mentioned, this is extremely concerning for food systems, right? Many of our crops are pollinated by bees, maybe honeybees, but also wild bees that are just out there providing this service for us while we're not managing them. I also personally think it's extremely important for ecosystems as a whole, even my yard ecosystem, right? I love walking around and seeing flowers and seeing diverse vegetation. And without pollinators to continue the reproduction of those flowers and of those plants, then we aren't going to have that diversity anymore. And so there really is a ripple effect when you see an impact on a group of organisms such as wild bees.
That statistic of over 100 bees in your small urban town of Meadville is amazing because most people don't see that many different kinds of bees or wouldn't know that there are that many different kinds of bees. And so they obviously are able to cohabitate participate in the same ecosystem.
Yes, definitely. And we found some indicators of where we see more bees than others. And so areas where we are allowing vegetation to just grow and it isn't overly managed, we saw lots of different types of bees and lots of species of bees. In people whose yards had lots of clover, we saw lots of bees. In areas that didn't have as much pavement, we saw increases in numbers because many of these species are nesting in the ground. And so if there's pavement everywhere, they're not able to do that. We found all sorts of interesting correlations with ground cover and with the availability of flowering plants.
Bees are one of those animal species that gets a bad rap because nobody likes a bee sting. A lot of people are allergic to it. Consequently, we're worried about having bees fly around us. But as you point out, they are so crucial to all the flowering plants that we have, to our agriculture, to the ecosystems, for other animals like birds who might be able to eat a bee. Yet, what is their role in terms of pollination compared to other insects? Are they one of the top pollinators?
Yes, they are certainly one of the top pollinators. So honeybees are fairly good pollinators. They're generalists, which means we use them in a lot of agricultural systems. And the fact that we can put them in hives and move them around makes it really easy to use them in those systems. They're also really hairy. Their pollen sticks to them in a way that it doesn't a lot of other insects. And the same could be said for native bees. They're abundant, but they're also very hairy, and so the pollen is going to stick to them. They've also co-evolved with these flowers, and so their body shape makes them so that they fit really well into a flower. There are certain vibrations required for some flowers to actually release their pollen. And so there are certain bees that are better at releasing pollen from the flower than others. There are other pollinators out there, especially insect pollinators, but we just find that bees are often the best option and they're doing the best job for us.
Many bee species are in decline. What about other insects? Do we have to worry about their decline?
We do. We know that things like monarch butterflies and lightning bugs, some of the really charismatic bug species, are in decline. We're seeing this happen amongst other less charismatic insects that aren't studied as much, but we're starting to notice patterns in their decline.
When we talk about what people can do to be sustainable, we failed to mention the importance of creating urban wildlife gardens for our wonderful insect species. We shouldn't have exotic species in our yards or on our campuses.
That's very true. It's also really important to make sure that you have plants that flower throughout the entire season. So bees are coming out in the early spring and they'll stick around until the early fall. And providing those floral resources for them and that nectar source is extremely important.
With sustainable campuses, are we creating citizens that will be promoting sustainability?
That's my hope. That's what we're trying to do. I'm actually in the middle of a study where I'm looking at what our students on our college campus know about our sustainability efforts. And so what I'm hoping to figure out is how we best communicate what sustainability efforts are happening on campus, the environmental impact of those efforts to our students, so that they will take that with them when they leave our college campus.
You're doing great research. You're providing great educational opportunities for students to learn about sustainability. I wish I could be in one of your classes and learn even more. But fortunately, we can talk about these issues on the air. So I want to thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you.
I have been speaking with Dr. Beth Choate, who is Associate Professor and Chair of Environmental Science and Sustainability at Allegheny College. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.